All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome to another episode here at Wabi Sabi. For everyone who don't know me yet, I'm Coach Jamie. So I'm a pediatrician who is now working towards becoming parent coach, helping kids and families sleep better. And everyone knows Coach Daniel. Welcome, Coach Daniel. How are you today?
Thanks so much. I'm good. Good. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for having me. All right. So today's episode, we are talking about normal sleep. So, you know, common question we get asked about is whether is my baby getting enough sleep, or my neighbor's child is getting 9 hours, is about the same age, and is my baby supposed to get 9 hours as well? So I think it's a very common question, and it's going to be very interesting to see what you have to say about this topic.
No, definitely a common question, and I think a very helpful topic to know about.
Okay, and so normal sleep, what is that? And can you answer what do you think normal sleep is?
Yeah, I think I like to think of this as like with citation marks normal because there's an idea out there, there's a prevalent idea out there that you know uh, that there is such a thing as normal sleep, meaning that a certain person of a certain age should sleep this amount, and if they don't, then that's not normal. And the tricky thing with this is that, of course, if a child doesn't sleep a quote unquote normal amount or in a quote unquote normal way, it implies that there's something wrong. There's something wrong with the child, and uh, it implies that we as parents are not doing something right. It implies that if they're not getting this normal sleep, then something might happen. So creates a lot of tricky situations. But basically, that's how I think of it when I hear normal sleep, quote unquote normal sleep.
Yeah, the same thing. I think, what usually when parents ask this is they're usually pertaining more to quantity, right? That number of hours. And then they most likely have searched online and have gotten like if you go to American Academy of Pediatrics or American Academy of Sleep Medicine, they have a chart where depending on your child's age, it's going to have like some suggestion of the number of hours of sleep your child is supposed to be getting. Like, for example, for toddlers, they are suggesting that they should get anywhere between 11 to 12 hours or even 13 hours. And then school age kids, anywhere between 9 to 10 hours. And then for teenagers and adults, anywhere between 8 to 9 hours, right? So, and then again, like you mentioned, if you are below anywhere below that ballpark, then again that creates that gap, and the gap will create stress around it. So, all right, and so um, we kind of talked a little bit about that. Well, is it a myth? Like, what makes it a myth? Like a perfect sleep. So, I guess if we talked about getting that number of hours in per night, if you are, or you or your child are getting that certain number of hours, then that's perfect. But I guess, is that a myth? And what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think the myth part of this, I think, is that there's an idea that a child should sleep a certain amount, but not only that, it's also that they should sleep this certain amount every night. So there's a
Right.
part of this perfect myth, the
Yeah.
perfect sleep myth, is that you have a certain amount of sleep that happens like a chunk every single night, like kind of like a robot. And of course, that it isn't true that first of all, it's a myth that all children are the same, and then it's also a myth that each night should be the same. I think it's similar to thinking that, oh, we should eat exactly like 1,200 calories every day, regardless of how much we exercised, how we felt emotionally, how much we ate yesterday, and like
Mhm.
and of course, like everybody knows that we don't eat exactly the same amount of calories every day. It depends on many things, and mostly we don't think that's anything. That's not strange. And I think we can apply this to sleep as well. We can understand that depending on many things, a child will sleep a little differently from night to night, and that's perfectly normal. And
No.
also, of course, like every little child is different from another child. So yes, I think it's a myth that there's sort of like I think these two things come up to me when I think of like the perfect sleep myth. I should put it that way.
Yeah, I know. It's like we talk about it in the world of pediatrics in terms of growth percentile. Like not everyone is going to be in the 90th percentile for height. It's the same way for sleep. It's highly individual. Like not all 9-year olds will be getting 9 hours of sleep. And so if your child happens to fall outside of that quote unquote range of what is normal, you don't have to kind of panic or stress out about it. At least not yet.
Not at all. And one more thing I want to add as we were talking here, which for those of us who are like our long time subscribers, which means that they've been tuning in for a couple of months because we've only been doing this for a couple of months. But anyways, for somebody who's tuned into all our content here, and they may be like, hey Daniel, you just said that many things impact like how a child sleeps, but then on the flip side you're saying that gas and brake is the only thing that matters, like sleep drive and hyperarousal is the only thing that matters. And how do you reconcile these? They seem to be contradicting, but
Yeah.
I really don't think they're contradicting, because if we think about like the gas portion of this, which is like sleep drive, how much we need to sleep, it only depends on how much we've been awake, but that varies,
Right.
and hyperarousal also varies because of like how
Depending
we
on
think
what's
about the
happening
day
in
and what's
the day.
happening during the
Yeah.
day, right? So
Yeah.
just variations in gas and brake leads to some variation in sleep,
Mhm.
and that I think that reconciles these two
Yeah,
things.
I think that's a good reminder. Just like, yeah, and kind of keeping it simple. All right, and so quantity myth. We kind of talked a little bit about that, the absolute number that you think your child needs, and if you're not meeting that number of hours, then it creates again stress or worry. So talk about quantity myth.
Yeah, there is something in the when we create content or when I educate in the adult world. One
Hmm.
thing I share all the time is that many studies have shown that adults, just healthy adults with no sleep problems, actually sleep about 6 hours on average when you objectively measure with the EEG. So in preparation for this book that we're writing, I was like looking at the pediatric world, and there aren't as many studies, but the ones I found were strikingly similar, meaning if you take a school-aged child, I believe they defined it in the study I looked at as like 5 to 12, and I think it was those numbers,
School aged, yep.
right?
Hmm.
If you look objectively at children in that age range with EEG, like brain monitoring, and see how much they actually sleep, the median, like the average amount is actually about 8 hours per night. They sleep
Okay.
about 8 hours per night, objectively measured. And so it's actually very similar to the adult world. Like in adults, it's like you're told you should sleep 8 hours, but most adults actually, objectively speaking, sleep about 6 hours. And in school age kids, it's like you're often told like you should sleep about 10 hours. They should sleep about 10 hours, but they actually sleep about quite significantly less objectively measured. And I think hearing this can be really like, it can take a lot of pressure off for a parent whose kid sleeps like less than the ideal amount or recommended amount.
Yeah.
But I think it's also helpful to contextualize this, meaning when you hear this, what I just said, it can sound like, oh, well, okay, I hear you, Daniel, but I don't think, most parents that I talk to, they don't say that their kid goes to bed like 11 and
Hmm.
gets up at 8, or 7. Like they seem to be sleeping more. Well, this EEG, this 8 hours by EEG, that doesn't account for the fact that we don't fall asleep immediately. and we are also normally awake at night. So even if a typical school-age child actually gets about 8 hours of objective sleep, it doesn't mean that that's like one
Yeah.
perfect chunk like that. It means that
It's all,
they,
yeah. They
they
have,
went to bed at 9, it took a while before they fall asleep,
right.
and they wake up a little bit, they transition out of
And
it.
you
But I
have
think
some
still the same is
arousals
normal.
in between. Yeah. Right. Um, all right. And then you talk about, so there's a quality myth as well. Well, you already kind of alluded to this, where they think that when they say 8 hours of sleep, and that means that they're, just sleeping for that chunk of time of 8 hours. But in reality, they are, waking up some arousals here and there, several times per hour. Is that right?
Exactly right. I think uh, we are often presented with this like what's called a hypnogram, which is when people hear this, they may be like, "But what's that?" But
Yeah.
I think everybody's seen a hypnogram. It's basically when you see these sleep stages, like okay, here you're awake, then you have stage 3 sleep, and then you have stage 2 sleep, and then you have REM, et
Yeah.
cetera, et cetera. And when you see those, they look so like they look so they look like so perfect, they look like, oh, that's how I should sleep. But in reality, when you look at like real EG data from real kids, it's not at all like that. The only thing I think is true is that yes, you have more like deep sleep in the beginning of the night and more REM sleep in
Yeah.
the latter part of the night. But it's not at all like the textbook. And what I want to point out here is that awakenings happen typically many times per hour. A child often wakes up, 2, 3, 4 times per hour. Although these are brief awakenings, they do happen, and they're a normal part of sleep.
Mhm.
Um,
And often the child doesn't remember about the brief
exactly.
awakening. Yeah.
Just like us adults, we often don't remember our awakenings, but they're part of our sleep, and they're there, we believe, so that we kind of like we wake up briefly, we scan our environment, okay, nothing dangerous, no predators, like we fall back to sleep. Like it's just a safety thing. Um, but I think where this is helpful for parents to know about is that when a parent thinks like, oh, I have to make sure my child doesn't wake
Doesn't wake
up at all, then we're in this place of like we're trying to achieve something that is not humanly, like
Yeah.
that's not a thing. Doesn't it's sleep isn't like that. So when we know that, oh, my children normally wake up many times
Mhm.
per night, but it's more like, okay, if there's a strong reaction to them waking up, then it can be like a little bit of a struggle. But waking up is a normal part of sleep.
Very good. Okay, and so again, yeah, so that's what we just said. Children wake up several times per hour, and again, that is normal part of sleep. And again, it depends on it's that our reaction to it that becomes a problem, right? If we think it's a problem and we think we need to do something about it, that's when it becomes a problem.
Yes, yes.
All right, and so how I was going to ask you, knowing this, knowing that okay, so every it's sleep need is highly individual, right? It doesn't have to be like if your neighbor's child is sleeping 10 hours, doesn't necessarily apply to your child. And knowing that several, arousals a few times per hour is a normal part of sleep. How does that help?
Yeah, no, I think it can really help because if we're like if we're comparing our children to our kids to our neighbors' kids, then I find that like we find something lacking that creates like this pressure within us. We feel like, oh, I have to make my child sleep more, or I have to keep them waking up less, which creates some anxiety within us, and our children like they sense that,
They
and,
sense
and
that,
so 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 they also become kind of like uncomfortable and hyper. They also become anxious, and then they have some more trouble sleeping, and then we feel even more we have to do something, et cetera, et cetera. So knowing that, uh, you know, uh, I would say anything that leads to less pressure is really helpful. Less pressure equals more sleep. Exactly. Um, Now, one more thing I want to add here, actually, which just came to mind as we are speaking here, was the common question of like, well, okay, I get this that it's individual, et cetera, but how do I know that my child actually sleeps enough, right?
right? No, yeah, I was going to ask about. So I think when you tell parents that, hey, It's highly individual. But then the next question they ask would be, so how do I know if my baby is getting enough sleep? And I
Yeah.
think we talked a little bit about this in one past episode, but can you remind
Oh, yeah.
us?
We might have done that, but yeah, the way I think of it is this way that I often ask parents a kind of a follow-up question here, which is like, does your child fall asleep unintentionally during the day? I think that's a very good question because if a parent says no, they don't, then that to me is an indicator that they are getting enough sleep at night. You know, if we're not getting enough sleep at night, our body kind of compensates by creating the sleep drive, which makes us really sleepy during the day. So if we're not falling asleep during the day, that is that can give us somewhat of a gauge, um, and um, and it can be tricky because often things we interpret other things like, oh, but he's hyperactive, or
Right,
he's
or is highly irritable. So,
highly irritable. Yeah,
yeah.
people often think that
Or
means he's not getting enough sleep, but that doesn't necessarily mean that.
all right.
Mhm.
Oh, I just had Echo remind me of something. Sorry.
So sorry.
All right. Yeah. So if your child's not having or microsleep or like these micro naps during the day, if it's not falling asleep in the classroom, alert and active during the day, most likely he's getting enough sleep.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, when it comes to like an older child that when their trouble sleeping is more like anxiety driven, then
Mhm.
that's the hyperarousal can kind of mask our fatigue and we can sleep very little and still not feel sleepy during the day. But when it comes to like the younger kids, like school age, like maybe lower school age, then I think, yeah, if they're not falling asleep during the day, then that's a good indicator that they're actually getting enough sleep at night.
Sounds good. All right. Any other things before we wrap this episode?
No, I just want to say thanks to everyone for tuning in. It's nice seeing some more subscribers. Oh, yeah, yeah. And one more thing. If you listening, yes, you, if you have a question, please put it in the comment section
Comment
and we can
section. Yes.
talk about it in an
Let us
upcoming
know
episode.
what you think about this episode as well. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.
Bye bye.